I believe it with all of my heart. When I was a much younger man, now almost 40 years ago, I attended the United States Military Academy at West Point. There were two things that I knew when I showed up, but that I learned even more while I was a cadet. The first is the centrality of human dignity and the capacity to practice one's faith. I'm an evangelical Christian. There are people here tonight of many faiths. But we know nations that deny the central right of human people to practice any faith. And communist regimes are, as Elmer said earlier, fearful of those of us who are faithful. They are atheists, and they deny basic human dignity to people all across their nations. And we should all stand and fight for that capacity to practice one's faith wherever one is in the world. The second thing I learned as a cadet was then reinforced in my first assignment. My first assignment after I graduated was as a young cavalry officer patrolling the then East German border between freedom and tyranny along the then boundary between West Germany and East Germany. I spent my days patrolling that space, driving up and down the border in my tank, and across from me were communists. These were mostly East German, but some Soviet guards. These were people who were spending their entire energy, their entire focus was keeping people inside of their own country, denying the people inside of their own nation the simple ability to raise their family and to love life and to protect those around them. These were people who I came to know very clearly were evil. These things that I learned came in very handy when I became America's Secretary of State, because I could see then too that American policy was backwards with respect to the Chinese Communist Party. We had it wrong. We'd had it wrong since 1972. We certainly had it wrong for at least the last 20 years. You should note, this is not partisan. This is not about Republicans or Democrats. This is about tyranny and freedom. And for the first time in an awfully long time, the United States redirected our energy and made clear that the Chinese Communist Party would not last forever. I also saw a set of leaders in the Chinese Communist Party that had tremendous power, but also feared people like you. They fear us. They fear us because we're prepared to speak the truth. They can sanction us. Miles talked about his sanctions. You should know. I was sanctioned too. My soon-to-be daughter-in-law, my son's getting married in the beginning of next year, called me and said, Mr. Pompeo, am I marrying into the sanctions regime? I told her yes. She said, I'm still in. We're prepared to speak the basic truth about human dignity and kindness, and the fact that each life is special. I come back to this central notion of an atheist regime that does not value human life, because at the end, this is so essential for the American people to understand. We know about what they're doing in Western China to some 2 million people who are held in internment camps. It reminds me of my time in Germany again. We all said that what happened in Europe in the 1930s would never happen again, and that the Chinese Communist Party today is doing that, persecuting these Uyghur peoples simply because of who they are. We know too, they're doing this to people of all faiths. Falun Gong are persecuted. Christians are persecuted. Anyone who believes in something other than the dominance of the political actors, the leaders inside the Chinese Communist Party, must be put down. You know you know that in the end, this will not happen. We will prevail. As Elmer said, I'm enormously optimistic. It is often very dark before we get to the right place, but I believe the world is on the right track now. None of this happens without an awful lot of work. I remember President Reagan when he began to confront, along with John Paul II and Margaret Thatcher, he began to confront the Soviet ideology. This is the central premise of what the Trump administration understood about the Chinese Communist Party. This is an ideologic regime. This is a regime that is intent not only on persecuting its own people, but on dominance of the region and of the world. And once you accept those two as the central thesis for how you think about the Chinese Communist Party, then the actions that an administration needs to take are very clear. They're straightforward. I will give you three central ideas. First is that one has to understand that this fight is worthy and that it will be a battle. And that when those who say, well, we just need to be nice to the Chinese Communist Party, don't understand is that negotiating with regimes like this is not possible. They do not understand life the way that each of us understands life. They do not understand power the same way each of us understands it. They are determined to do the singular thing that Xi Jinping, the General Secretary, speaks about. He talks about the Middle Kingdom and the China Dream. And the China Dream could not be more opposite of the dream that I have for the people of Hong Kong and the people of the United States. The American dream, the Hong Kong dream, they overlap. Miles would remind me that when the people in Hong Kong were in their most difficult moment, that they waved American flags. They're counting on the United States of America. They're counting on people like you to continue to speak candidly about the threats that are posed to them. The second thing we had to accept was that this problem is not a long ways off. And when I say that, I don't just mean a long ways off in the future. I mean it's right on top of us. It's here. It's inside the United States of America today. And so we had to first make the case here in our country of the evils of the Chinese Communist Party and the greatness of the Chinese people, 1 billion plus strong, who want nothing more than freedom for themselves.
Yes.
We made that case. We made that case fearlessly. We never failed when the people of Hong Kong stood up to remind Americans that they were in the right and that the authoritarian regime was in the wrong. And we never failed when we found that there was a massive spy ring being operated inside the United States, that we were prepared to take real risk by closing a consulate in Houston, Texas. This had been known for a long time, but no administration was prepared to actually shut down what the Chinese Communist Party was doing inside of our country. I gave a number of remarks dealing with the Chinese Communist Party during my 1,000 days as Secretary of State. There are two that I want to speak to in the context of how we thought about this problem set. The first was a set of remarks that I gave at a meeting of all the American governors, the National Governors Association, my team. And when I speak about the Trump administration and the work that we did, you should know I had a fantastic team. Leaders like Miles Yu, people like Keith Kroc and Meng Chang, a woman named Mary Kissel, a group of people who understood the tyranny of communism and were prepared to help me prosecute that effort. I went that day, I learned that the governors were all going to be in Washington, and I asked for 20 minutes to speak. They gave me 20 minutes on a Saturday afternoon. So by the time I get into the room, there are probably 40 of our nation's governors. They're Democrats and Republicans alike. They're frankly not paying much attention to America's Secretary of State. They're governors. They have many problems at home in their own communities, in their own states. What do I need to know about foreign policy? I said several things to them. One of them is that you should know that your pension funds are investing in weapons of war that may one day kill American citizens. You should think long and hard about investing inside of China when the Communist Party is using the proceeds of hard-earned dollars that were made by Americans and invested in their retirement to build out the Chinese military apparatus. The second thing I told them is you should know the Chinese Communist Party wants you. This finally got their attention. They were truly, it was quite fascinating to watch the audience. I had managed to get declassified a report which spoke to the Chinese Communist Party's efforts to influence governors across the United States of America. These were deep influence operations. And the document that I got unclassified had a rating system. It was a table that demarcated for every governor whether they were a friend of China, a foe of China, or if they were being worked on. When I shared that fact that this document would be released as soon as my remarks were over, every one of them went to their cell phone to say to their chief of staff, I need a copy of that document. You know, it's a bit funny, but the truth of the matter is, you know it's true. You know that the Chinese Communist Party is operating right where we sit tonight. It wouldn't surprise me if they're sitting right outside of this restaurant this evening. It wouldn't surprise me at all if they were at a county commission meeting in every county in California this past week. It would not surprise me at all if they were walking the halls of every state legislature all across America. The second pillar, which I referred to, was the fact that we need to acknowledge that the Chinese Communist Party is intent on winning the information battle here at home. We need to bring all of America's tools to bear to prevent that from taking place. Look, the last thing we came to know, Miles referred to, was how we began to approach the Chinese Communist Party. We shorthanded it, we called it distrust but verify, playing off Reagan's policy of trust but verify with the Soviet Union. But it was an important change to that statement. We came to know that there wasn't a single thing uttered by a Chinese Communist Party official that had any possibility of actually being true. We knew that they would lie. We knew that they had lied to the people of Hong Kong. We knew that they had lied to the leadership all throughout their own country. We knew that they continued to lie to the United States about the virus that came from inside of their country, and they continue to this day to cover this up. Remember, we now have 4 million people across the world who have perished because of a virus that almost certainly came from their Institute of Virology in Wuhan. That work that was being done took this virus and made it more lethal and more contagious. And then the Chinese Communist Party, when they knew that this lethal, highly lethal, and very contagious virus was inside of their own country and spreading, they made two central decisions. And these central decisions reflect what I've just spoken to. They made the decision that said we're going to shut down an entire province inside of our own country, and we're going to put thousands of people on airplanes to places like Milan, Italy. The world must understand that they didn't value human life. They didn't understand that the danger that they posed to the world was something that they ultimately must be called to atone for. We have a responsibility. That virology lab continues to operate. We have a responsibility to recognize that the stories that the Chinese Communist Party continues to tell around the world remain lies. I am heartened tremendously by this evening. So many of you have encouraged me in the things that we were trying to do in the last years of the Trump administration. We knew that we had a special duty. We live in this very special place, America, the true beacon of freedom for the world, the most exceptional nation in the history of civilization. But when we fall short, we have an even deeper duty. When we refuse to stand up for peoples in the world who are simply asking for their own freedom, then we bear a moral responsibility for failing to do all that we could to help those people achieve that freedom. I too many times cried for what was taking place in Hong Kong. I watched these people take enormous risk to put themselves in the streets and be bludgeoned by Chinese communist military and police forces. I watched them sing anthems like you all sang here this evening, simply demanding that the Chinese Communist Party live up to the promises that it had made, not only to the people of Hong Kong, but to the people in the rest of their country. I fear that Hong Kong now is lost until such time as this communist regime no longer has the capacity to dominate that place. And I fear too that American financial institutions that are operating in that place today don't understand that they too are complicit in denying the people of Hong Kong the freedoms which they so richly deserve. You know, we don't always get it right in the United States. I don't make that claim. But in the end, history has demonstrated that we will. And this is why I'm so encouraged by it this evening. You all took your time to come to this very special place to encourage each other, to encourage Miles and me and Elmer in the mission that we are in. This is an enormously worthy fight. There will be setbacks. There will be days when we all shake our head and say, I don't see the path to taking down this regime inside of China. You should know that every regime has fallen thought that they were invincible. This one does too. It is precisely at the moment of the greatest hubris that the greatest risks exist. We watch Taiwan today. I pray that the American administration and leaders in South Asia, in Australia, in Japan, South Korea, for America can't do this on its own. Pray that each of these come to understand that the people of Taiwan, this democracy, this place that has enormous economic creativity and vitality and are great people, many of whom themselves fled China. I pray that leaders around the world will come to see that the responsibility to support the people of Taiwan is real. It is a moral duty. It is a clarion call for the world. And we cannot permit Taiwan to go the way of what Hong Kongers are suffering today. I can tell by your enthusiasm. You all are going to keep crushing it. I'm counting on you. You should know that every American leader who served in our administration, who worked not only to close the consulate in Houston, to declare that genocide was taking place in Western China, to deliver a framework and speak about the evils of Chinese Communist Party's efforts with Huawei and the technology that they have stolen and the jobs that they have destroyed all across the world, and the imposition they have made through this crazy thing called the Belt and Road Initiative in countries all across the world, that every one of those folks who worked in our administration can hear your voices as well, because it will encourage them to stay in the fight. In the end, every good battle about the way we treat each other as human beings is won with the moral courage and clarity that I have experienced here this evening. Thank you for that. God bless you. Thank you. God
Stand with Hong Kong!
Fight for freedom! Stand with Hong Kong!
Stand with Hong Kong! Fight for freedom!
Stand with Hong Kong!
Fight for freedom!
Young singing straight to victory. We wish you all the best today, one after another. Thank you.